Good morning, everyone. We have Coach Payton for the conference call. Megan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Patrick, and welcome, Coach. We'll begin with Zach Stevens of DNVR. Go ahead, Zach.
Hey, Coach, thanks for talking
Perfect.
with us this morning. I got a two-part
Yep.
question. First off, you spoke a lot about how important it is to get off to a fast start, getting that first win in week one. What does that mean for the season? And then the second one, you passed Mike Shanahan for the most all-time wins yesterday, especially with your Eastern Illinois connections. What's that mean to you?
Well, let's start with the second one. There are certain times where you feel age. When I see good friends, they stay the same. When you see your good friends' children growing up, you feel age. And like you guys have heard me say before, I grew up on Mike Shanahan. Going to school at Eastern Illinois, like at that time, he was like 1A, like the one guy that made it out and made it into the NFL. There have been some other, players that had tryouts or workouts, and Burl Ives sang a bunch of songs, and then there were, a handful of different people. But from a sports perspective, Mike was in the NFL, and that was just something I recall, and as a student athlete, and he's been a tremendous, close friend, and I would say confidant. So, when I hear that, you don't pay attention to that. Probably a week and a half ago in training camp, Kay brought up something, she's like, "You're 3 away from Parcells." And honestly, when I say this, I don't know where that master list is, and it's not something you look at. It's kind of like, all right, but it does put in perspective maybe how fortunate, how long the career has been, and then how many, good players I've been able to coach. And look, let's hope, I have a chance to win a second Super Bowl like Mike Shanahan. This is his year. This year, the next year, but very soon he's going in the Hall of Fame, and probably should have been in, 2-3 years back. But that's coming real quick, and something like that is, I think you reflect on it more than you focus on it. What was the first question? No. There was a part A that I just forgot after I just rambled about Mike.
The first part, Coach, was just how important was it to get that first fast start?
Yeah, we just had the team meeting, and I just started clapping and said, "Hey, look, it's been the first time in 3 years, and we looked at the schedule and we said, I know it's a little cliche, one at a time, but the first thing I said to him is, you have to understand how difficult it is to win in this league each week. And you go through the slate of games yesterday, and there's most of them that are all, within a score. Last night, obviously, was the epitome of a crazy finish, but and there may be one or two that are north of a score. And so getting that first win was important to us because, we had talked about the prior 2 years, talked about, digging ourselves in a little bit of a hole last year. And they're all, when I say they're all, I know that some seem more important. The division games seem more important, but when it comes to playoffs, if that's, winning your division, eating, all of those things, and I'm not getting ahead of myself, but each of them are worth the same unit. And so, you don't want to look back and say we missed out on this week one game. And so, today, for the better half of the next 3-4 hours here, we'll be spent on this, this debrief, if you will, or the game we just played, and then we turn the page to the next team.
Barney Stapleton, Associated Press.
Hey, Sean, I'm just wondering about Jahdae Barron, your first round pick. Does the fact that he comes into a defense that's so loaded with playmakers sort of take that pressure valve off of maybe that some other first round picks would feel in their rookie seasons?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think it's a great question because, look, there's this balance, and I'm kind of working through it on offense with Pat Bryant. I know Pat's not a first-round pick, but you look at the pitch counts, and so Jade had a fairly good pitch count on defense, and then of course in the kicking game. And I think it's more challenging for that first rounder when he's just thrown into the starting lineup. We would never do that. Those players got to earn it, but clearly there's a great vision for his flexibility, which is inside and outside. And we've also got Jaquan, who we think is outstanding playing in the nickel. So you saw us in some dime subgroups yesterday where we matched him up on a tight end, Barron and Jaquan on the nickel. In today's NFL, and you guys have all seen the evolution and how teams are throwing it more from more spread sets. Those nickel and dime players are playing more than the Sam linebacker 20 years ago, if that makes any sense. So, I think it's important that when the game ends, the first thing I asked PK for this morning, can I see the pitch counts, the player participation, and just look through across the board. What are they playing on defense or offense? How many snaps are they playing in the kicking game? And then making notes of that before the staff meeting so we can discuss, if someone's playing too many snaps or if we need to find a way to get someone more reps to help rest another player.
Eric Dalala, DenverBroncos.com.
Coach, when you signed Hufanga in the offseason, you talked about him being a first responder. Just curious how you saw that on display yesterday and how much that can transform the defensive performance.
It's contagious. His maturity level and leadership level. You guys, the more you get to interview our guys, and you already that process has begun. But I found myself really amazed talking with him and relative to his perspective, how he carries himself, this passion for, there's this drive to be real special and to win. And Greenlaw possesses the same things, and you're going to see him sooner than later. Something that that's very important. Football instincts. Our league has had a ton of great safety play from players maybe that tested a certain way and yet had great instincts. They have to be willing tacklers, and he's more than just that. So, he was good yesterday. I know that.
Chris Thomas in the Gazette.
Yeah, hey, Sean. Bo Nix was saying after yesterday's game that he was perhaps too aggressive on the interceptions he thrown, and he has to be smarter taking care of the football, especially with the top-notch defense that you guys have. So how do you perhaps manage an offense differently when you have a top-notch defense versus if you didn't have one?
No, I think, look, that's a great question. I think it's really how the game's unfolding, and look, I appreciate Bo, him saying that, and yet, man, part of that's on the play caller, and so understanding how the game is unfolding. Let's just put ourselves in last night's game, where whether it's the Ravens you're playing or the Bills you're playing, and the game is unfolding in a manner that it was last night. Both teams were fairly aggressive because and so when the game's unfolding in a different manner, like yesterday, where look, it was a lot. It had a lot to do with that late decision not to kick a field goal. It wasn't any confidence or non-confidence with Will. I think you line up and he's going to hit those. But the way we were playing defensively, that idea of a kick and a block kick and a scoop score, that troubled me relative to how we were playing. And then feeling like you've got a good play in that situation, and then defend the down. You miss the field goal there, you're going to be at the same spot. So as it goes back to Bo's comments, I think that's a head coach and a play caller as well as a quarterback understanding, hey, how this game is being played relative to how aggressive our tolerance level is. And so I think Bill used to say that all the time. Hey, are you paying attention to how the game's being played? That may impact how you call a game on either side of the ball.
For Gabriel, the Denver Post.
Hey, Sean, with a chance to look at the tape, what specifically did you think worked better? Obviously, you got the big hit from Harvey in the second half, but just in the run game generally, what did you like better, assuming you did like it better in the second half, compared to where you were at early on in the run game?
Yeah, look, early on, and we didn't, and it was obvious right from the stretch. There were more passes early in the openers, and then sometimes when you have an RPO and it gets thrown, you're calling it for it to be a running play. Sometimes you have a running play that's checked out of versus a certain defense, and then all of a sudden you've thrown the ball 14 times and run the ball 3 times, and so having enough in your run game offense where you can get up and know that you're going to have a handoff. It may be one that goes run to run, or you can kill it to another run. And I think our focus in the second half shifted that way to where, I don't ever want the defense to dictate. There are times where we want to run the RPOs. There's times where we want to kill to the throws, but there's also times when we want to run the ball. And I think we kind of moved in that direction in the second half, and then hit some big plays where we knew it was going to be a run. So I got to be better there, and I think it's one of those day afters where you look back and say, all right, let's look at how we really wanted to start this game and get those 2 runners going, because we think we've really improved in that area.
Jeff Legwold, ESPN.
Sean, a lot of defensive coaches I talk to talk about your willingness to change a lot of players play to play, and I'm curious if that's more difficult early in the season, and does that kind of put stress on your play clock as a play caller?
Yeah, it doesn't. It generally doesn't stress the play clock. I think one of the things that we've looked at in each year we'll look at, like this year is going to be a little easier because of we've got 3 receiver groupings, a couple tight end groupings, but I think the stress it causes for the defense, and I've had long talks with head coaches that I respect, the stress that it can cause a defense. And once we kind of know these tags that are fairly simple, what can be fairly efficient and easy for us can be very difficult for the defense, and oftentimes it can be unsettling to where you get maybe just a certain look, not a certain defense, but maybe they decide to stay just in nickel. So I think the thing that can be or slow you down, we had 2 delays yesterday. One obviously was a delay, the other was intentional. So we had 1 delay yesterday, and it's late off a big game. That's my experience. Or you're sending in a wordy play call, or maybe a check with me where there's too much in the verbiage, and we got to clean that up. But I think relative to the personnel groupings, we always kind of go into a game, and it changes sometimes. but it's something that we'll be smart with, and yet the benefits from it we feel are worth it.
Coach, that appears to be all the questions we have today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.